Okay, hey everyone. Welcome to Type Tools. It's me, Scott, and then I'm here with Jacie. And today we're going to talk about extroverted feeling. We're going to talk about what it is, what it isn't. We're going to talk about how you might develop it, why you should even bother developing it, especially if it's difficult to use, how you can hone it, and if it's something that you're overusing, how to balance it out. Another thing we're going to talk about is how it might look like for each of the types. So we're going to get rolling with that. I think it might be helpful, JC, if you shared a little bit about your process with developing extroverted feeling. So JC's an INTJ, and that means extrovert, and we'll get into this later. Extroverted feeling is in the what's called the trickster position, so it's seventh on our functional stack. What that means is it's basically a blind spot. It's almost invisible. And so JC's had a unique pathway in developing it. So I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think it's helpful to know that it is blind spot for me, so I'm not fooling myself thinking I'm using something that I'm not. So that allowed me just even knowing that I don't have access to this thing helped me figure out how to emulate it. So what I found is that I actually use a combination of introverted feeling and extroverted sensing. Extroverted sensing to understand, people's facial expressions, and then introverted feeling to remember when I made that face, how it felt. And in that way, I can kind of pretend to have FE. It's like a workaround to FE. Is that what you would call it?
So how's that going for you? How has it been learning it?
Difficult. It's difficult. I think anytime you're working on those super low functions for yourself, it's just a harder process. But I will say it's very worth it. For me, at least, it's made interactions with people easier, and I do feel more capable in navigating them. I don't know what people are feeling, but I feel like I have a better guess these days.
That's good. And we can get into that a little more specifically. So using introverted feeling with extroverted sensing to emulate extroverted feeling, it's totally doable. And it's something I would recommend for usually the STJs and NTJs with extroverted feeling much lower in the functional stack. You got to work with what you got. So extroverted feeling, just a short intro to it. It's essentially the ability to tune into people's emotions, values, and the needs of the group. So it's sort of when people talk about vibe checks, when they talk about reading a room, that's kind of a combination of extroverted sensing and extroverted feeling. The physical room itself would be extroverted sensing, but the vibe check, the feels, how is everybody doing? How are we all feeling? It's a we, it's an us. It's how are we feeling? How are we doing? And more broadly, if you were an abstract type, it's like how is society feeling? How is society doing? Can we do trends? If you're a more concrete type, the way it looks is how is my family doing? How is my tribe doing? My five best friends, my eight best friends. And so extroverted feeling is pinging the tribe to see what they value and what they like. And an extroverted feeling on its own values what other people value. It can contain its own value system, but it's paying attention to what others value. So it's noticing how other people feel and adapting your behavior to support harmony. So if something's disharmonious, these are the people that come in and smooth it out. And why do they smooth it out? Because people with it in their top four, meaning it's conscious and they're aware of it and it's something that they're running through, they can feel the vibe. It's not some invisible thing. It's something in the same way you might be able to smell a bad smell, people can feel a bad vibe. And I'm sure a lot of you listening could relate to that. You walk into a room and you're like, oof, something's off. And so that could be intuition also. But in this case, what we're orienting towards is how people are doing.
And before we jump into this, if you want to follow along with the definitions of what we're talking about and the function stack placement, all of that, if any of it's confusing to you, we do have a printout, so check that out in the description box.
So I'm extroverted feeling. And I guess this is kind of heavy, but I went to a friend's funeral. It wasn't It was his mom had passed away. So I had two friends there, and one was sitting in a corner, and I knew he was really hurting bad immediately. Like I could tell walking in, I just sort of checked it. But at the time, I was walking with my other friend, and we went up to it, and she was a ESFP, so hugging, hand holding, that's a great way to support. They're a lot more physical. And so I spent some time there making sure she was okay, seeing how she was. And so I ended up just sort of holding her hand and then patting her back. She uses introverted feeling, so she's broadcasting how she feels, so I can feel it. And then I noticed in the other room, all of his body language indicated that things were bad. He was experiencing something totally different, and I could see it. And I was like, okay, I need to circle back at some point. Even right now, he's got too many people around him. Now would be a bad time to go say hello. And so I came back later, and I just sort of, since his vibe was different, I sat with him and I could tell that he just needed someone to sit with him. He is an ENFP. And so he was feeling things deeply. I could tell like he kind of wanted a hug, but didn't really want a hug. He needed one, but didn't want one. And that might be a gender thing or something. And then so I just sort of sat with him, and I didn't have, like, at the end of the day, he's going to be hurting no matter what. It's a horribly painful loss to be going through. So I just sort of sat with him, and then I checked in with him, and after a while I could feel like it was time to go. I wasn't going to solve this for him. I wasn't going to be able to fix it. He was going to hurt, but like I could sit there with him for a little while and help him feel supported. Extroverted feelers pick up on that vibe, and then they sort of help people flow through it. They're not trying to tell them how to feel. They're just sort of sitting with it and helping them navigate their own emotional space. And so, one thing I'd like to point out is I adapted my behavior to each person. I didn't do the same thing with both. I didn't have a special canned phrase that I had memorized that was like, okay, so when you go to funerals, these are the things you say. I didn't really do that. On some level, you could argue that some of the things that I might have done would be too invasive or perhaps inappropriate. And ultimately I know that they were good because they thanked me afterwards. So I got some social feedback that was positive. And I'm mostly doing this because it's one that happened to me, and it's something that I can illustrate in this whole extroverted feeling thing. So extroverted feelers are going to be making decisions based off of collective well-being. They're not so much concerned with how they're feeling, because if you're concerned with how you're feeling, then you aren't concerned with how other people are feeling at the same time. Now, you might toggle between the two, you might go in and out, but you're only doing one of those at a time. You can't focus externally at the same time that you're focusing internally. So if they're usually focused on how they're feeling, then they're probably introverted feeling. If you're usually focused externally, then you're probably going to be an extroverted feeling type, generally speaking. It's a safe designator. Now, returning to the definition of extroverted feeling. So we talked about noticing how other people feel, adapting your behavior to support harmony, making decisions based on collective well-being, and that means values, valuing social connection, emotional expression, and shared standards of etiquette and behavior. So what is appropriate is context sensitive. So, for instance, a social event in the continental US is different than a social event in rural Thailand. There's still going to be extroverted feeling things in common. People feel sad, people feel happy, but the labeling of those things and the appropriate engagement with them differs from group to group. And so extroverted feeling is attentive to those differences and generally respectful, especially if it's further up in your functional stack. So think of extroverted feeling as your emotional antenna, and it picks up on other people's vibes, adjusts to social temperature, and tries to make everyone feel seen and safe in an emotional way. Like they're able to be expressive and be themselves. Now, again, it is regulating for the group. So you're an individual within the group and we're looking for group harmony. So if we're at a big table, sometimes there's going to be a clash between someone's personal values and the values shared at the table. And so that might be fighting over politics at Thanksgiving. So the extrovert feelers are going to want to try to swim in that arena and maintain the shared harmony. And so they might try to pivot a topic towards one that's not going to cause quite so much strife or create a spin on it so that it feels better to the people engaged in the conversation. So they might bring them to a point of mutual understanding instead of being banging heads against I'm Republican, I'm Democrat, you're bad, no, you're bad. So they're trying to navigate that space fluidly. And the higher up extroverted feeling is, the more sensitive and capable you are of moving in that space. So let's look at that a little bit.
Before we get
Mhm.
into this, can we talk about the function stack a little bit? You've mentioned this a couple times now.
Yes. So we can talk about the functional stack. So we have 8 functions, 4 of which we're conscious of, and then 4 of which would be expressed subconsciously. So everybody does everything, but we're going to be more consciously aware of a few things, just like people specialize in different ways. So you have what's called the hero function, your top one. So of the 8, so there's 8 functions in total. There's intuiting, sensing, feeling, and thinking, and then there's introverted and extroverted versions of each of those. So right now we're talking about extroverted feeling. So you can have extroverted feeling at the top in the hero slot. So it's optimistic. You use it easily. You use it often. It's your preferred tool. You like to use it. It feels natural to use it. It's normal to you. It's like breathing. You don't think about it. You just do it. Then moving down, we have extroverted feeling in what's called the parent slot, and that's the attitude that it has. So it's still capable and strong, but it's more like something you pull out when you need it. It's not the one you use all the time. It's sort of like something a woman would keep in her purse or a wallet. You pull it out when you need to use it. You know where it is, you know how to use it, and it's responsible and it's careful and it's pretty strong. So the INFJ and the ISFJ have it in the parent slot, and the hero slot is ESFJ and ENFJ. And then moving down, we have the child slot. So this is naive and capable and it's used well. But in the same way, a child is not super responsible. They'll run outside in the cold, not knowing what they're doing. But so someone has to take care of them and protect them. So extrovert feeling child is like this. It just wants to give everybody sunshine and candy and have a good time. And it's not highly sophisticated, it's not highly dialed in, but it is used a lot. So it's regularly used in the child slot, but it's less developed and practiced. And then as we're moving down this functional stack, there's you have less and less conscious awareness of it and less ability to use it. So the fourth function is the inferior function, and that's extroverted feeling in the fourth slot. So that's ISTP and INTP. And those two, so in that slot, what it means is you're aware of it, but there's a fair bit of anxiety and nervousness around it. It's not something you use naturally, it's something that you're aware of. It might exhaust you to use it. And so you just have to be careful about that. But if you develop it, it's very good because it can obviously increase being connected and being close and nurturing and fostering relationships. Then moving down, you have the fifth slot. So if you have it in the fifth slot, that's the nemesis function. You have INFP and ISFP, so the fifth. So the critic slot would be ESFP and ENFP. And then we have the trickster slot. So Jacie would be one of these. And that one, at this point, it's almost invisible. You basically have no functional awareness of extroverted feeling. So this would be ISTJ and INTJ. And it's not that you can't practice it and develop it, it's just naturally, this isn't going to be a frequency you're attuned to. And then down at the eighth slot, this one's called the demon slot, because usually by the time you're using this function, it's in a point of crisis. It's in a point of intense, emotional. Basically, you've gone through all of your other tools, all your other functions, and you've gotten here. So usually by the time you get here and you're using extroverted feeling in the eighth slot, this is basically the nuclear option. Things have gone wrong. And with this one in the lowest slot, you know you don't have it. And you know you have more awareness of your lack of it. Whereas in the trickster slot, you don't necessarily know you don't have it. And that's why it's called trickster, because it's blind. So those are the eight slots. An extrovert feeling can fit into any of them. All right, so that's a lot of mumbo jumbo. That's a lot of stuff that we went through. And at this point you may not even know what type you are. So it might not even be super important to know where extroverted feeling lands. And then additionally, you may not even care about extroverted feeling, which would probably be a lot of the types that value FI. And extrovert feeling just gets in the way, right? I know what's right. I don't need to make sure everyone else around me, they either know what's right or they don't. And I can't spend too much time worrying about that. So those are going to be the people that use extroverted feeling, generally speaking, in the unconscious or the bottom four functions.
Okay, but let's
And
say you do know your type and you do care about developing FE so you can interact with the relationships that matter to you most better. Does the position change how you would develop the function?
yeah, quite a bit, quite a bit. So with people in the parent and hero slot, really learning to develop that is about establishing emotional boundaries, not using it all the time, every time. So if you have high FE, you might just keep all of your opinions to yourself all the time because you don't want to disrupt harmony. So for if it's in the hero and the parent slot, really what it's about is learning how to engage in communicating difficult information when it's needed. So being able to balance it with introverted thinking. That's really because people they're good at it. They don't necessarily need to develop it more. They need to learn how to balance it with their other functions.
And I know you've said to me before too that people with high FE or with FE, they don't know their own values. That's more of an FI trait. And so they're better served by surrounding themselves with good moral character so that their FE is influenced by people with good moral character.
So just imagine you're an FE person, you're absorbing the values of the people around you, then it's very important for you and your sake that you surround yourself with good people who you can't help but absorb the values around you. So you want to be in situations and around good humans who are living and breathing worthy values. So if you want to reflect goodness, you need to be around goodness. And that would be the ENFJ and INFJ, ESFJ and ISFJ. Now, if you want to go about developing extroverted feeling, it's basically all the people after that because generally speaking, ENFJ, that's what they do. They live and breathe it. And so for instance, in the child slot, it's present, you're using it, and you like to use it, but you could, instead of being this charming, charismatic person, you could choose situationally to be more deeply empathetic and deeply connected to specific people. So, so a lot of times you find the ENFJ, INFJ, ESFJ, ISFJ people with higher extroverted feeling kind of taking on a consoling role in their friend group, taking care emotionally of the people around them, helping them feel good, helping them feel heard and taken care of. An ESTP or an ENTP can choose to increase their extroverted feeling and become more of a caretaker. So a lot of times you'll hear the ESTPs are fun to joke around with, they're fun to be around. A lot of times though they want to be doing things, they want to be thinking critical, they want to be mobile. So getting down with a group who is struggling, if they want to more fully influence and provide that care, they need to be a little more conscious of how much focus they're putting into extroverted feeling. So the way that might look, ESTP or ENTP come into a room and they can tell the vibe's a little off. Usually what's going to happen is they're going to crack a joke, they're going to say something silly. They're both pragmatic types, and maybe the depth of what's going on is not enough to be broken by a silly joke or something funny, in which case they can be more respectful of what's happening consciously. They're going to focus on this because they need to, because it's in the child slot. And they could sit down, they could be like, "Hey, how are you doing?" Like a more meaningful engagement with extroverted feeling. And so that's a way that they could go about developing extroverted feeling optimistically. Now, with an INTP or an ISTP, since it is a valued function, but it's so low, the fourth slot, so the inferior function. What can happen here is because both the INTP and ISTP have a strong push towards critical thinking and detachment, what can happen is that can alienate them from other people. Like they may not say thank you. They may not say, I appreciate this. They may not say, how are you doing? They may not say, this is great. I appreciate this. Can I present this idea to you? They want to avoid all that because it's exhausting. Using your fourth function is difficult, can generate a lot of anxiety. And to avoid that, you might, if you're an ISTP or an INTP, you might avoid it altogether. But it is an important function because it connects you with others. And so, speaking to INTPs and ISTPs, you may have the most brilliant idea in the world. You might know how to fix something, you might how to explain something, but if your FE is very, very low or not used at all, then you won't be able to connect with the people such that you can communicate this gift, this idea, or this concept to them. And it may be as simple as smiling and saying hello. It might be a very simple fix. I guess what I would say is try it. And so all those brilliant ideas that you have or more likely to be accepted and taken to heart by the people around you if you can be more harmonious, if you can be more soft and caring about your delivery. And that takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of intention. And as we're going down, it becomes more and more challenging to develop extroverted feeling because it becomes less and less conscious. You're less and less aware. So think about watching a movie. So when you're watching a movie and the frame rate's fast, it just feels like you're watching a movie. And you know what's happening in the movie. You can follow what's going on. As you move down these steps with extroverted feeling, it's like frames start getting taken out. So the movie starts to, it's harder to follow the movie, it's harder to watch it, it's more difficult. So by the time you get down to INTP, it's almost like a slideshow. It's like a slideshow of a movie. And the sounds coming in, you have to really, get close to the screen so you can follow what's happening. And even then you might be a little bit lost. But the cool thing about developing a function is you can increase its frame rate through focus development. And just to continue that analogy down, if you're down at the very, very bottom function, the movie might have 50 frames in it. So imagine watching your favorite movie, but it's 50 pictures. And that's all you get. And that's basically what extroverted feeling would look like for an ENTJ or a ESTJ. And so you can up your frame rate. And if you reach a point, though, you have to make a decision here. You have to decide realistically, am I going to be able to develop this? So what I like to make a case for is that extroverted feeling is very valuable and it's extremely useful in an abundance of contexts. And the more you can use it, the more equipped you will be to handle life and handle relationships and handle emotional exchanges and so on and so forth. Now, what we're going to get into as we go down here is a concept called functional emulation. And so Jacie alluded to it with using introverted feeling and extroverted sensing. Another thing you can do is if you have lower extroverted feeling, you can ask for advice from people who have it higher. So you can find a friend that's an ENFJ. You can find a friend that's an ESFJ. You can find these friends that are really good at it. You can ask them how they would say it. How would you, I need to communicate this. How would I say it to avoid unnecessary conflict? So you can outsource extroverted feeling to people who are really naturally gifted at it. Now, at the end of the day, you do want to develop yourself in as many ways as possible, and it is good for everyone to develop everything. But we have a finite amount of time, we have a finite amount of focus, so sometimes it makes sense to outsource that to people who are more naturally gifted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I know that's advice you had given to me. I have a friend who's an ENFJ, and you told me to watch her and emulate her in situations where I felt uncertain about FE. And I think if you have a close enough relationship with someone who has that higher in their stack, you can kind of start to guess or predict what they might say in those situations. If you're paying attention and it's something that is important to you to learn, start recognizing those patterns and then using them.
Yeah, can you think of a situation where you tried that out?
Yes. So my friend is an ENFJ and we do very similar work. We work with chronically ill people. And chronically ill people have a really rough time. Like they are dealing with that 24/7 and it can impact their mental and emotional state. So sometimes they're a little spicy. And previously, I would just wash my hands of people who weren't, I want to say behaving, but I know that's not socially appropriate to say, but like they weren't being, polite and they were interacting rudely. And so I would just be like, block, like not my problem. And in some ways, it's good because then they're not infiltrating a community of people who have been vetted and are being polite. But on the downside of that, they're not getting the help they might need. And so I started to watch what my ENFJ friend would do in those situations. And she would kind of walk them through step by step, like, hey, it seems like you feel really bothered by this statement. And she would kind of poke at whatever she wouldn't ignore their behavior, but she would kind of poke at it and then ask them if they were okay, was essentially what she would do. She would label what they were doing as like, hey, you're being kind of rude, but she would say it in a really diplomatic way. And then following up with that, are you okay? Is there anything we can do to support you?
Yeah, that's great. So just for everybody listening, so I'm an INTP, so FE for me is in the fourth slot. It's clunky and anxious. It's challenging. And it takes a lot out of me to be deeply emotionally connected to people for long periods of time. But I value it and it's important to me. So I work on it. And so some general strategies you can use to work on FE. These are ones that could apply anywhere that it fits. And Jacie mentioned one of them, so I'll just go into them. So we have active listening practice. So in the case that Jacie brought up with her ENFJ friend, her ENFJ friend mirrored the other people. And for a lot of you who are listening, you're gonna be like, oh, duh. But for some of you, you'll be like, oh, okay, that's how you do that. And so this is for you. So reflect back emotions, which would require you to label them. And interestingly enough, depending on your delivery, mislabeling is fine. Mislabeling is fine because then it presents the other person an opportunity to correct you. Both, either one, accurately labeling or even mislabeling will draw attention to the behavior. So even if you're worried about getting it wrong because you're new to it, doing it wrong or right will move you towards better extroverted feeling and better outcome. So it's important when you do it, though, to have a calm demeanor. And if you're able, be curious. or even playful, and then try those out. See how they work. That's why comedians can get away with all of these harsh truths, because they say it in a way that's funny. And it took them a really long time for the good comedians to figure out how to say the harsh things in a funny way. So these are skills that you can develop. And so you can acknowledge the emotional experiences of other people, and that can mean that they're now able to be more attentive to what you have to say because they're not bogged down by this emotional cloud that's filling up their mind and keeping them from focusing. So you can relieve that pressure by mirroring or reflecting back emotions. And then, a basic phrase you could use is, so it sounds like are you doing okay? Or how are you feeling? Are you all right? And then there are better and worse ways to do this, and they're situationally dependent. Sometimes just drawing attention to it is enough. And then importantly here also is pausing, listening to understand. So you don't have to take their point of view, but you want to understand their point of view. You want to be curious about their point of view. You want to listen to what they're saying because at the end of the day, what they're experiencing may be on some level reflected by other people who aren't saying anything. So let's say you're in a big group and there's a vocal protester. There might be other people in the group that have the same protest, that have the same thing that's bothering them. And if you can carefully engage with the people in front of you, then you might be able to alleviate the emotions of 20 people through this one interaction that's done well. So I'm just sort of trying to reinforce why extroverted feeling can be beneficial. Now, situationally, you may not have a great deal of time. And so that's why being able to do this quickly, it can be really helpful. And if you're an ENTJ, just think of it as a best practice. Taking care of people's emotional feelings gets things accomplished more quickly because it does. And what's that phrase people say? It's slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So think about it on those terms. And it might be able to make sense that taking people's emotional situations into account can speed team cohesion and work, and it can make social situations better. And it can do a lot of really great things. Group settings with emotional engagement, which is what I was referencing earlier, like a comedian dealing with a heckler or a naysayer at a boardroom meeting or someone saying something upsetting at a party. In order to develop those skills, you need to be a part of those situations. So for our introverted listeners, you would want to join group projects, do volunteer work, be a part of team sports or community roles where feelings are involved. So let's say you want to have a better handle on it. Next time it comes up, you can think it through. What happened? What were the results of that? What were the outcomes? Is that what I was hoping for? Did it work? And just the act of writing it down or recording it or talking it through with someone that you respect can help you feel accepted, can help you feel understood, and also pivot your behavior in more productive ways. So feedback, getting feedback on which requires vulnerability and it requires humility, and that can be challenging to develop. Now, another thing to ask in those situations is what were the emotional dynamics? And so if extroverted feeling for you sits very low, that might be hard to do. But the very act of doing it will draw attention to it, and where your consciousness flows, that's what grows. I don't mean to make some silly little euphemism, but it's true. What you orient your consciousness towards yields results. So bring your attention to emotional considerations sometimes for the people that have extroverted feeling lower, and it can facilitate other things much more smoothly. So Jacie was talking about how her ENFJ friend said, I'd like to support you in this. And notice when I say it, I have kind of a softer tone. So a softer tone helps people calm, right? So a lot of people who have higher FE are aware of the effects of tonality. They're aware of how they communicate. So even now I'm doing it, right? So earlier I was talking like this and it was more intense, but you can lower the way you talk, you can slow your words down. All of those things can slow the conversation down and help people reorient, right? Because how are you going to have a critical conversation if emotions are all over the place? And so it can really help if you have that skill set or you have someone that you know who is gifted in that way to alleviate some of the emotional turbulence. Learning emotional vocabulary can also be beneficial. So build your little dictionary. If you've ever gone to a paint store, they have the color swatches with all the different shades and colors, and you can go through them, you can roll them open, you can say, okay, well that's I thought all these were green, but it's dark green, it's forest green, and then it's not just purple, it's magenta, it's that and admittedly I'm not super amazing with colors, but there are a lot of different colors, just like there are a lot of different feelings. And so the more you know how to appropriately label feelings, the more fluidly you can engage with them. And you might just start with, I feel sad. Do you feel sad? I feel happy. What does happy look like? And then you can look for words like there's joyful, there's peaceful, there's anxious, there's disdain, there's disgust, there's rage, there's hurt, and they all carry different feelings with them. And so the more you can learn how to expand your vocabulary in this emotional domain, the better you can engage with it. Just like learning Spanish when you're in Colombia, you have your dictionary, you want to communicate something. You look up in your dictionary or you have it on your phone, you have a little translator app. So the translator app in this case might represent a friend who's emotionally fluent, but you won't always have them with you. So it's important that you have the skill too. And then finally, ask trusted friends. So whether or not you can type people in your environment, you know when people have greater gifts at diplomacy. And so you can present to them a situation and tell them what you're going to do or how you might be thinking or what you might be thinking. And before you engage in that situation, you can get feedback about how they would go about saying a thing or doing a thing or engaging. And ultimately, it's still your call. You still maintain your choice in all of it. It just means you're more informed and more capable of making a good decision.
Wow, okay, so we covered a lot of ground today. We talked about FE, function stacks, how you might need to develop it differently depending on where it lies in your function stack. So if you're interested in getting typed, if you're not sure what type you are, or you want to work on another function, because you can work on any of the functions, and I would make the argument that you probably should work on all of your functions. You can book a session with Scott at toolswithscott.com.
Well, thanks everyone for listening today. And if we're using the energy of extroverted feeling, let's go out and be just a little bit more attentive to the emotional needs of the people around you and a little more capable and able to communicate in a way that is received as best as possible by the people around you and paying more attention to vibes and feelings and appropriate labels. And all of these things can get you a little further down that road. Yeah. So thanks everyone for coming, and we'll catch you next week.